Hi, I'm Debbie Moraes, and this is Legal Matters, the program that's designed to cover some of the critical, contentious, and timely issues that are facing businesses and consumers today. It's legal information, it's practical solutions, and it's straight talk about a wide variety of issues, from finance and family law to Social Security and workers' comp and more. If you're getting a divorce, you want to pay attention today. Planning for financial realities following a divorce happens long before you arrive at court. Apparently, that's often an element that people overlook or just don't pay enough attention to. We know that the ramifications of divorce are far-reaching, long-lasting, and sometimes devastating. So in prior segments, while we've covered the legal aspects of it, we decided that it would be a good idea to focus a little bit on the financial, specifically the financial aspect of it and how it relates to the overall process. So once again, we have with us Jackie Grasso and David Bazar from Odette Bazar Cordero Grasso Law Firm in East Providence, and also we have with us today a special guest who specializes in the topic, a certified divorce financial analyst. We have with us Paul Capuziello. Welcome.
Thank you.
We appreciate the fact that you're with us. Immediately we think about alimony and child support and pension things and houses and the value of them going down. It must make a very complicated issue. So let's dig in. What is it that you actually do, and how does the process work?
The process actually works where either the attorneys like Jack and David will bring me in to help their client either gather the information, value a pension, a profit-sharing plan, work on a budget, do future projections for pensions, help get a value of a house, whether the client should keep or sell the house, how much they need for retirement, children's school, alimony, child support, basis issues related to stocks and bonds and mutual funds. And we sit with the clients and figure out what it is exactly that they want, try to set some of their expectations, and then manage things from there.
That sounds like quite an involved process.
It is.
A lengthy process, perhaps.
It can be, depending on the amount of the assets and expenses and how long the clients have been married.
Jackie, David, since you get the client initially, how do you know who should deal with a financial planner as opposed to someone who really doesn't need it, or does everyone need it?
Well, Paul will, he can help us in all cases. You don't have to be a very rich person for Paul to come in. But certainly if you have an affluent, somebody that is, has a lot of money, then it would help to have a financial analyst in. And there are tax ramifications to divorce, and you definitely have to have your client go to an accountant. And what Paul does is he actually helps in trying to settle the case because, as he said, he looks at future projections. So where one person would think today they're getting a 50-50 settlement in terms of finances, Paul can project it out and say to the client, well, no, it's not really 50-50. You might be getting 60-40 because this asset is going to do this in about 15 years. So what he does actually helps immensely to settle a case, because quite often if it's not children you're going to be held stuck on, it's going to be what? Finances.
So let me ask this. If you're dealing with a client and say they're not wealthy, but in these days considering your house is your best and only asset and now it's devalued, suddenly that must get a little more complicated. So regardless of whether or not the asset was a very expensive home, might that make you more inclined to call someone in such as Paul right now because that's such an iffy proposition, whether it's pensions or homes or whatever?
It wouldn't just be the home. The complicating factors in divorces many times is what do you do and how do you take the value of a pension, stocks and bonds that you may have acquired quite some time ago at a lower basis, and what is the implication of dividing all of that up. And I think for an attorney, Paul's input can be very helpful in determining whether or not your client's better off. We can, Jackie and I, deal with the legal aspects of what you're entitled to and how to divide that up. I think where Paul's value would be in telling and sitting with a person and telling them which asset, as you're dividing up assets, they may be better off asking for or ending up with. And I was going to ask Paul, have you been brought in on mediations and that type of thing at all?
Right. I do a lot of mediation work, and the whole point of bringing me in usually is, as Jackie mentioned, is to keep the case out from having to go to a trial. They're expensive, they're emotional, and most people really don't want to go through that. So when I get involved in a mediation, now I'm not working for Jackie's client or David's client or somebody else's client, I'm working for both of them. And even if I am working for one party that's hired me, my goal is to make sure that it's a fair settlement for both, so everybody feels like they got a fair deal. It's not okay to take somebody to the cleaners so that they can't survive either, because we end up back in court. People can't make their child support or alimony payments, or they don't live up to what they're supposed to do, and then it just costs more and costs more court time and so forth. So, as you're talking about the house, one of the things that I'll do with that is, a lot of times people want to keep the house emotionally, but they don't know that they can't afford it. So when we put it in black and white and show them the implications of keeping the house or getting rid of the house, it makes that decision much easier. It takes the emotion out of it, so then they can get on with actually getting to the rest of the settlement.
One of the things we have to rely on from our clients is their financials that they disclose to us. So we have to get a feel as to what the client's needs are. If there are children involved, what are the needs? That's important. And going back to what I said, if somebody is living a moderate lifestyle, then it may not be as difficult. But if you have someone an affluent person, has a very high expectations in terms of finances, then Paul would be able to help us out.
Now, both of you are mediators as well
Yes.
as lawyers, and there
Yeah.
may be sometimes when someone comes in to approach you as the attorney versus the mediator. In each case, would you call someone such as Paul in at the same time along the process? If you're a lawyer, you may be needing different materials at different. What's the difference? What's the difference?
Well, as a mediator, I always tell the clients when they come in that I'm there to foster the communication between them. But I'm not their lawyer, so I'm not going to give them legal advice. If they want legal advice, they should consult a lawyer. Same thing with an accountant, real estate appraiser, all of that. But I would suggest oftentimes that either both of them agree to bring someone like Paul in so that he can help sit and help them work through. And that's the whole idea of mediation, is helping them work through the issue of, as Paul said, emotionally, you may want to look at a way of keeping the house. Financially, that may not be possible. And if you get the emotion out of it and let Paul or someone in his situation help them work through those numbers and say, this isn't realistic and it's not going to work in the long run, don't do it. Let's figure out a better way. That's a much better way to go through a mediation. So I would certainly recommend, but it's the client's call in a situation like that. As a mediator, I wouldn't just call Paul up on the phone and say, hey, can you come sit down for this?
They would have to consent, obviously.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what's invaluable with the service that he has is also, if my client ends up getting $400,000 in a stock fund, they may not have ever handled finances in their life. So quite often, there's always one person who pays the bills, so the person may not have any knowledge of finances. We'll send them over to Paul, and he can tell the person how to invest the asset and what the future projections would be.
Is that something that's part of your work?
Yeah, quite often it's interesting you say that. Quite often, after working on a case, either one or both parties will actually ask me to help them handle the finances afterwards, because I have been so intimately involved. I already know everything. There's been a trust built up because I've helped them either get their money and worked with them on what they need, why they need it. So there's a continuation of that process after, because they feel comfortable already, and especially, like you said, one person's usually handled the finances. So it does become very important for them to have someone they're comfortable with at that point.
How is what you do impacted by whether you're asked to work with the higher income person versus the lower income person in that particular couple? In other words, if you were asked to deal with, say it's the woman who was making more money and she's going to have to divide her assets versus the husband perhaps who hasn't had the same kind of job or investments or whatever, how does your work differ? How does it change when you're working with either Jackie or on your own?
If I'm working with the higher income earner, obviously they need to be able to afford what they're going to have to pay to the other person. So if they're in a higher tax bracket, we want to make sure it's as advantageous as we can for them, and almost make it so that it gives them an incentive to pay the support so that they can continue to pay it. We also want to